Hey everyone, welcome to Beyond the Pew.
We're back.
We are here
Episode what?
every week.
This is.
I honestly have no idea what.
I think this is episode 21.
I think it's 22.
22?
Maybe.
No, 21.
Maybe. I don't know.
Check
I don't know which
the
one it
last
is. We can
previous
check it.
episode.
If you didn't listen to it, go listen to it.
That's a milestone right there. 21, 22 episodes.
It is.
And it's not.
We had set a goal. I had set a goal. I
Okay.
shouldn't say we had set a goal. I had set a goal by episode 37. You would be able to recite the phone number
Correct.
for people to be able to text in if they have questions.
330. No, that's it.
That's all you got.
Yeah, for now. That's something that's
Okay, we got 15 episodes or 16 episodes.
yeah. So
depending on what episode.
what 10 numbers, I got 3. So
But you already know it's whatever. It's 330-331-6453.
listen, it's
330-331-6453.
Say it again.
330-331-6453. You have another
Say it backwards.
15 weeks, 16 weeks, something like that. Spell that. Yeah, that's what you always say. Spell that.
No, that's yeah.
But we have another 15 weeks before you can memorize that. But you have to memorize that because the challenge was if you don't by that time, you got to shave the beard and just a mustache.
But I never agree with this.
You did agree to that.
I did agree
think
to
it's
this.
on camera too.
Where we're at? What
So
episode?
it's on video. You can look back. It's on camera. But just the stash.
Just the stash.
Would the wife like just the stash? Would Jenny approve of just the stash?
No, she will not approve of just the stash. Although I do think that I would look pretty cool with it.
Wow, that's very narcissistic
Yeah.
of you. But if you,
How is that narcissistic?
because you're saying you would look good. You're
I said cool.
self-proclaiming
Cool.
that you would look really good.
No, that's just.
But here's
confidence.
the motivation: if you love your wife and you care about your wife's opinion and value her opinion, you'll learn the number by episode 37, so you don't have to do that which she wouldn't like.
Wow.
That's the challenge.
You just went. Wow.
No, that's the challenge. All right.
Wow.
So I'm
Hey,
excited.
I think first of all, I think we should acknowledge 2 things.
Please
do. Before we proceed
Yes.
with our
Please-
episode. Number
please
one,
acknowledge
this cannot go unnoticed. We do have to acknowledge the fact that what has happened in Florida. I'm
Yes, with the
hoping
hurricane?
that for those, maybe there's some people that are, maybe if there's anyone listening that has a family member. I have a family member who, at the time of this recording, is dealing with the aftermath of the storm. But if there's anyone out there, maybe praying for you guys.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that's going to be needed in the days ahead. So pretty devastating what's
Yeah.
taking place down there. So
Yeah, and we're here. To the best of our abilities, we're here.
yeah.
So, also in a different note, we got to talk about the Bills.
Yeah, I figured you'd bring that up.
Yeah, it's obvious. We've been talking about the Bills every single day or every single episode.
I don't think that's accurate.
Oh, for most of the episode.
Don't think that's accurate.
Most?
Nope. I think if we've done 20-some episodes, we maybe have 5 or 6 where the Bills
Yeah, so
have come
most.
up. That's not most.
What is most?
Most would be majority.
Who
and
says that?
That's what most means.
Oh.
Yeah, it's the majority.
So when it's not majority, what do you say?
then it wouldn't be most.
What would it be then?
It would not be most.
What would you say?
Anything other than most. Because it's to say something is the most of something, that means the majority of
I
something.
would like someone out there that has time in their hands to go back and listen every episode again and count how many times we
Why
talk
are you
about
bitter about that? Why are you jealous about the Bills?
No, I'm not. I'm just wanting to
You are.
acknowledge that you guys lost,
We did. And as I've mentioned before, some people get very excited about regular season wins.
but not the Bills.
Bills have much more on their mind than regular season wins.
Well,
they have Super
don't
Bowl
have much
bust.
in their minds. They haven't
Listen,
won a Super Bowl.
I'm the first person to admit that if Buffalo does not win a Super Bowl, it's disappointing because they're that good.
Were you disappointed
that
when they
good.
lost to the Dolphins?
I was, yeah. I was disappointed. Yeah, it's my team. I like to see them win.
Okay,
but
that's enough with the
again,
Bills.
I can acknowledge it's a disappointment if it's not a Super Bowl because the Bills are that good. Now, take Browns fans, for instance. You're a Browns fan. Browns are disappointed if they don't make playoffs because the expectation for Browns fans is they'd like to make playoffs. Bills fans don't get excited about playoffs. Bills
No,
fans want
Bills
Super
fan
Bowl.
or you?
Bills fans. They want Super Bowl or
You
bust.
speak for all of them.
Well, when the
You're
whole
the voice
country,
man.
the entire country of NFL analysts and sportscasters all predict Buffalo to be the
They
Super Bowl
also
champs.
predicted them to win over the Dolphins, but they got destroyed by the Dolphins.
They did. That's why I'm saying it's
Yeah,
a
so-
disappointment
yeah,
because they
so-
were predicted to.
So I wouldn't base my things on prediction. Predictions are not solid facts.
I don't think anybody's basing it on that. I'm
You
saying
are.
that's what leads to disappointment. Is if there's a prediction that doesn't come true when it's supposed to, it's disappointing.
Yeah.
You follow.
You're very defensive about the Bills.
I'm not. I'm just telling you reality of where.
Listen, thank you so much for tuning in. We're
Beyond the
excited.
pew, what's it
We're
like?
beyond the. What is your life?
Beyond the pew. All right,
What
listen.
is your life behind the pew?
Now let's take a transition here.
Or
Those are-
beyond the pew, not
you know,
behind.
those were some bold thoughts. Those were some bold thoughts.
Yeah, bold,
But
for bold
let
people.
me yes, bald heads and bold thoughts were just shared
Yeah.
there. But because we both have bald
Tune in,
heads.
tune in for the next.
I don't know if people know we're both bald.
Yeah,
I'm by choice. I shave my head.
yeah, same with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, that being said, what we like to do is we like to take in questions if people have questions and send. So, I received 3 questions. My understanding,
Ooh.
I think it's 3, texting, and I'm going to read these for the very
Okay.
first time to you, Eric.
Okay,
And you're going to answer these questions. And
we're gonna answer that
Okay.
to the best of our ability.
So, first question that I will ask you, and this is pretty. It's a pretty common question. Is cussing a sin? Is cussing a sin?
Yeah. I mean, there are quite a few Bible verses that will hint to being careful with your words,
Okay.
being careful with the things that that you say, that how you say them, and things like that. Let me start with that. I would also say that the thing about cursing is interesting because it is all about the cultural setting. So, for instance, in Spanish, it's kind of interesting. You have words that we will use in the Dominican Republic that are considered to be just completely curse words. Like if you say those things in Spanish, like if you're a kid and you say those things in front of your parents, you're getting slapped. But if you go to Spain and you use the exact same word, you're welcome. It's like nobody even bits an eye. Like
Yeah.
it's well embraced, right? So it's cultural. So that's one thing that we have to consider too, right? What I will say with cursing, I will say 3 things without you stoning me, and then I want to hear what you have to say. Number 1, I would say,
Without me stoning you.
yeah, because you may disagree. I would say number 1, it has to be, it goes back to having like clear conscience. That's very important to have clear conscience. If there's a particular word for you that means, that it, because I'll give you an example. I have known people that will say that to say the word gosh or to say the word, oh my God, those will fall under the category, not of necessarily just blasphemy, but even of like, they will treat it as if it was a cursing. If that's how you are about particular words, then I would say then stay away from them. Don't even use them, right? Number 2, I would say you have to follow the rule that we have. Like I believe in James, to control your tongue, making sure that you are speaking with integrity. But number 3, I think that you can see even in the scriptures examples where there are times where where harsh words are used that in their culture would have meet the standard of cursing. And so the argument that I will put is that maybe the argument I would put out there is that there are times that may be acceptable. But again, you have to be careful and you have to make sure that you're speaking with integrity, following the example that we have in James. Okay. So, all to summing it up, if you're somebody that you struggle with cursing, stay away from it, because chances are you will curse at a wrong time with the wrong intention and the wrong setting, and then it will become sin.
So is there an acceptable time to curse?
I mean, I give you the example of when what Jesus said to the Pharisees when he called them brood of vipers. That would have been considered in their context a very offensive and borderline cursing. But he used that in that setting. It was an acceptable thing for him to use because it captivated the attention of everybody there, and they were able to understand what he was referring them to be.
Okay.
I believe Paul is the other one that uses a very harsh word when he's talking about what his works is. Yeah. I can't remember exactly that. They're like a filthy rack of how does he go?
Your righteousness is like filthy rags.
Yeah, like a filthy rag, and that would have been considered very offensive.
Yeah.
So I would say that there are times that may require. I mean, I give you an example of something that I experienced a few years ago. I got to be part of a training, and in the with law enforcement, and the game master that was taking care of the thing, he voiced to me. He said, "Hey, know that everything that they do, they're gonna come at you very aggressively and loud and offensive, and it's not because that's who they are necessarily, but because those things is what get people to respond to a command, especially people that are trying to be
Sure.
life threatening. And
Yep.
so in the conversation, in the warning that he was giving, it's like they're gonna come at you.
Yeah.
So I would say for a Christian that is allows law enforcement, and he has to be using, maybe not so acceptable language that we would embrace on our day-to-day life. But if in their setting, in their occasion, for the sake of protecting life, I would say that's an acceptable example.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
where I stand. That was a long answer, but
Yeah.
what about you? What about you?
Yeah. I mean, I think context is key,
Mhm.
right? I think understanding the culture and context in which we're living in is a key kind of proponent of coming to some conclusions on using, whether we call it cursing or cussing or filthy language. I mean, the Bible says that we're not to let have filthy language out of our mouths, and it, we're not to have coarse joking or
Mhm.
jesting come out of our mouths. And a lot of the times when that word choice is used, is in the context of whether we're building someone up or we're tearing someone down.
Mhm.
A lot of times the motivation behind and the reasoning behind the words that we're using and choosing to use is emphasized in the context where our words are being talked about, and how we should not be, James talks about out of the same mouth proceed blessings and cursings.
Mhm.
This ought not to be true. In the context of that, it talks about the destructiveness of the tongue. And what seems to be the context there is about either building someone up or tearing them down. Words, in and of themselves, can just oftentimes be words that are offensive or not offensive depending on the context and the culture we find ourselves
Yeah.
in. So, as your example, something that might be considered cussing or cursing over in the DR is not necessarily in America, and things that are curse words in America are not necessarily in the DR. But even contextually in America, I remember when I went to college and I went and lived on campus, guys would be using words in the dorm that growing up I was always
Yeah. Don't say
taught
those.
were cuss words, or like, you don't say those things.
Mhm.
And I would hear people say it in the dorm, and I'd be like, they just cuss. Like, I'm looking around, like, is everybody else appalled like I
You're
am?
waiting for the mom
And,
to come
and
out of
yeah, I'm
the
like waiting for
closet.
like my dad to come out and be like, put that soap in your mouth. And but it didn't happen, right? But there were certain things that were considered in my
Yeah.
growing up period. You don't say those things. I remember when everybody, and I don't use this word, like, I don't know that you'll hear me use this word very often. I very rarely use it. But when people say that sucks, like when I was growing up, if I said that sucks or used that word, I would get this look from my dad, and I would be like, "Oh, I didn't say that. I never used that word because it was like a bad word to use."
Mhm. Mhm.
I remember I went to college and everybody like was saying it, and I'm
Yeah.
like, "Is that not a cuss word anymore?" But it was like in
Yeah.
growing up. Now, before I knew Christ, I used to cuss and used to say every word in the
Yeah.
book, and that's where I feel like some of it goes back to not just the word that's being used, but what is the reason the word
Yeah.
is being used. So contextually,
Yeah. Well.
there are times that words or strong language might be used that is not necessarily, in my opinion, biblically sinful or inappropriate, but it certainly can be used in that way. And so I feel like what you had mentioned, the motivation behind what we're saying and why we're saying it, but
Yeah.
also our conscience before the Lord really should have a huge part in
Yeah.
determining what we are able to or not to. And so with believers, for example, and I'm not going to list all the cuss words here, but there are a number of words that some believers would say that's a cuss word, and others believers would be like, that's not a cuss word.
Yeah. That's okay.
They would say it's okay. Well, who determines that? Well, part of
Yeah.
it, I think, is your conscience before
Yeah.
the Lord. And are you purposely seeking to offend with those
Yeah.
words? Are you seeking to belittle with those words? Are you seeking to communicate something that is contrary to godliness by your using of those words?
Yeah.
And if that's the case and you're dishonoring the Lord or you're hurting a brother, offending a brother, we have to take that all in consideration.
Like I remember when I was taking class for English, one of the words that they taught us was the word piss, like being pissed at something. And
Whoa.
yeah, exactly. But hear me out. This is what they told us it meant. It meant to have fervent anger towards something, or to be extremely mad about something. That's what it communicates.
Yeah.
So I grew up with that understanding. To my knowledge, I never knew or thought in my mind that was offensive or
That some people would
borderline.
be very upset. to
Yeah,
hear
and
you.
so I remember one Sunday from the pulpit that I was teaching, I wanted to communicate that something that as believers should make us extremely mad.
Yeah,
So I used that word.
yeah,
In my heart, my intention, never in my mind, I thought that was a curse word.
yeah,
But to some, that is what it meant. That's what it means.
yeah.
That's that's
Well,
just,
that's an example. One of the words I was talking about when I went to college that guys would use regularly in the dorm, and I'm like looking around, like waiting for somebody to
Yeah.
come out and do something, and it was nobody
yeah.
blinked an
I mean,
eye.
like I said, like they teach you that in English school. They said this is a word that sounds like this, and I'm like, okay, well, this is a very severe word. You don't use it every occasion. It catches people's attention. I'm gonna use it for this message.
Yeah,
And then someone's like, yeah.
I don't know how that would fly. Like if Sunday morning
Yeah,
you
no,
were preaching,
well,
and
thankfully,
you're like, listen,
thankfully,
church, we need to be. I don't know how that would fly at Maranatha.
Yeah, well, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Be interesting. I bet people would look up.
they
Like
did
if
look
they
up.
were, or if they were
They
not
were
paying
shocked.
attention, it would
They were
catch their
shocked.
attention.
Yeah. But yet again, Paul and Peter, or Paul and Jesus.
Yeah, I think the difference is I wouldn't necessarily say that Jesus or Paul used something that in the context and culture they were in would have been considered vulgar. I think strong as it
Yeah.
relates to strong
Yeah,
language,
strong.
yes, but as it relates to
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a difference between being vulgar for the sake of being vulgar, but there's another difference
Yeah.
of using words to catch the audience when you're delivering a
Agreed.
very explicit message
Yes.
that you want them to understand.
and I would agree, and I would just say in general though, most people are not cussing for the sake of making a point.
Correct.
They're cussing simply because they're
Their
wanting to
tongues
cuss.
are just
They're
going
just
wild.
wanting to.
Which it
yeah.
leads me to my next point. This is again, if you're listening to this, we're not giving you a green light to go on and
No,
like get off
correct.
from turn the podcast off and
Yeah.
just start cursing at the first person that drives in front of you that
Correct.
cuts you off or whatever. Like no.
Which when you're driving would be the
Yeah.
yeah.
Is that a acceptable moment?
No. No, because I feel like that would be an anger.
You'd
Right?
be like, you hold it, you hold
That would be an anger. Yeah, that would be an anger.
You start chewing gum the entire drive.
Yeah.
Just,
I think it's even a good test too. If your kids repeat something, is it something you want them to repeat?
yeah.
So like if you're like, I don't know if it's a cuss word or not. Well, do you want your child to say
To
it?
go around saying the things.
I think that's maybe a
then
good test.
Cut it off.
Yeah.
I was so again. This is not a green light for you to
Correct.
listen. If you're watching there, I'm gonna use a random name, Sydney. We're talking to you, Sydney.
Yeah.
Do not
You said Cindy and then you said Sydney.
because there are two people.
So which one?
The two of them.
Okay.
Do not. You do not have a green
Cindy
light.
or Sydney.
Yeah.
What we'd like you to do is comment below the cuss words you think are acceptable. No, just kidding. I'm kidding.
Do not do that.
Don't do that. But yeah, I think that's where we have to. I think sometimes there can be this difficulty of we try to toe the line. How close can we get? You've heard that illustration before
Yeah.
from people of sin. Let's not see how close to the line we can get before it's sin. Let's stay away from the line completely. When it comes to our language, in the choice of words, and in particular the culture we live in, and how so many different cultures are different, and the usage of words in culture are different. We have to be sensitive to, the Bible talks about we are to seek to live peaceably with all men as much as possible. Live peaceably, to love others, to encourage others, build others up, esteem others better than yourself. So our words have to be doing that. When it comes to cussing, sometimes cussing is cussing and it's nothing more than someone trying to be funny or someone trying to get a point across, or it's not offensive, it's not hurtful, it's not demeaning to people, it's not purposeful in the sense of I want to dishonor God. And there has to be some discernment in that. But I think we can sometimes get too bent out of shape about it. But then there are other times that I think it's important that we have that conversation because of our testimony.
Yeah.
And what is the watching world seeing from us?
'Cause
Because there are certain cuss words that even people who are not followers of Christ, who do not necessarily have high standards of morality even, which some people have very high standards of morality that are not believers.
Yeah.
But some people who have high standards of morality, some people who are, they would even recognize that's not an appropriate word for people to say.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to be, the Bible calls us to be holy as God is holy.
Yeah.
And so that should filter into everything we do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we could talk a lot more about that,
Yeah,
but I think
for
we've
sure.
talked about that enough. Can you define what it means to meet people or non-believers, it sounds like specifically, where they are? When we say, hey, we need to meet them where they are, what does that mean? Can you define what that means?
That's a good question. I think that That would obviously vary depending on the person and where, I think the phrase what is getting at, meet people where they are. So if I'm teaching to my students and I'm saying meet them where they are, I would I would think about the Christian that is well knowledge on the Bible and is well indoctrinated on what they should do and then what shouldn't do. And then I would think about their friend who is lost, that they don't know anything about God, that in their minds are living a good life, they're doing what they're supposed to do. And you have the Christian that is well indoctrinated going to this individual and just get on him because everything that they're doing is out of obedience to God, or contradicting to what the Bible says, and they get on them, and they, instead of like win them to Christ or pushing them away from Christ in a sense of becoming legalistic, I guess is where I'm going with this. I will say to meet them where they are. It's like, listen, if you're not safe, and I'm a believer, and I know that you're broken right now, and that you are struggling, that you're having a difficult time. I'm not gonna come at you in a condescending way. I'm gonna meet you where you are. I'm gonna try to talk to those hurts. I'm going to try to talk to you with the struggles that you're dealing with the hope that in those conversations I can point you back to Christ. That's kind of what I will say. Meet them where they are.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of times when people use that phrase in Christianity or Christian circles, obviously what Paul the Apostle comes to mind, I become all things to all people that I might win some, where Paul talked about the necessity of whoever it was he was going to share the gospel or he was wanting to reach, he was willing to come alongside to understand and to be basically part of life with them in a way that's honoring to the Lord, obviously. We think about him when he would go into the temple and he would talk and he would debate and he would share. When you think about he was approaching, the Greeks where they had a temple and they had a statue to the unknown God, and he came and he was able to talk to them and relate to them. So I feel like some of that stems from Paul's statements of I become all things to all people that I might win some. But I also think what it goes with that of meeting people where they are is we're called to love people, right? And so I think this is Jesus modeled this, where Jesus didn't have this mentality or this ministry of waiting for people necessarily to come to where he was. He would go to where they were. When he would eat with tax collectors at their homes, he would go into their homes and he would be eating with them and participating with them. Obviously not in the sin that people would participate in, but he would be participating alongside and with them in ways that were honoring to the Lord. But he would go where they were and he would be eating with them. He would do things other people wouldn't do simply because of association, right? And so I think meeting people where they are is showing genuine love. It shows a desire to understand where they are, and it shows a desire in love to be able to communicate with them the gospel, to stay firmly planted in truth, not compromise the truth of the gospel, but not also being completely, removed from the reality of what their life is. And so I think sometimes Christians can be guilty of just a cookie cutter, I don't care who you are, what you do, where you're at, or what's going on in your life, you're going to hear this. Whereas meeting people where they are and having an understanding. I mean, I even think about it when Paul the Apostle came to know Christ, as a Jew, as someone who knew the law, as a Pharisee. He understood and knew the Old Testament, like inside and out. So when he came to know Christ, he understood the fulfillment that was taking place. But when a Gentile audience who wouldn't have that background, they wouldn't have a previous understanding of all of the Old Testament concerning Christ. And so sharing and come alongside those that didn't have that background would look a little bit different than those that had that background. And same is true today.
And you hinted to something that I think is very key. It's very important for us to acknowledge. At least, and maybe this is just more of my personal view, but something that really gets to me. When you think about that phrase of like, we need to meet people where they are, another thing that go with that is the assumption that, we look at Jesus and we say, well, Jesus was a friend of sinners, so we have to be friends of sinners. And one thing that I like to clarify about that, because often it's to my knowledge, it's misunderstood, is that Jesus was a friend of sinner not because he went where those people were necessarily. He was the friend of sinner by association. So, like you mentioned, a tax collector who was considered a sinner, someone that was not welcomed by their society, Jesus met them at their homes, and by spending time with them at their homes, not in the place of, unquote, sinning, at the place where they live life, then he got the phrase of friend of sinner.
Sure.
But in our context today, many people will use as an excuse to then go on the other extreme where they will say, I am willing to go close to sin so that I can reach the lost.
Yeah.
I personally have a problem with that because I feel like that's not a method or a format that you would see Jesus doing. I wouldn't see any of the apostles, and I wouldn't see any of Jesus' disciples in their time of ministry where they were like, in order for me to reach the lost, I'm willing to come too close to sin. I just don't see that. I think that what that does, it can give us an opportunity where we can justify putting ourselves in a situation, in our position, where as believers we shouldn't be.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, that's interesting. I feel like there's a lot of debate on that, right? And what we can, or I mean, there's a familiar phrase that people say, and I don't know how I feel about it, but I've heard a number of people say, we're willing to do anything short of sin to reach people for Christ. And I understand the undertones of that.
Yeah.
I think the difficulty is there are certain things that aren't necessarily sinful, but they're unwise.
Yeah.
And so we have to use discernment.
And the way that they'll push back, it's like, well, it's good for you to say that, but when was the last time you led someone to the Lord?
Sure. Yeah. And is there true, authenticity in that desire?
Yeah.
I've heard the analogy before that if someone is an unbeliever, they don't know Christ. 1 Corinthians, Paul talks about how we should not have an expectation of those that are not followers of Christ that they would live in a manner that's pleasing to God.
Yeah.
Nor is our job to try to conform them into our image of what they should live like, because they're not going to honor God if they don't know God. But I've heard the analogy before, and it was recently, I forget who heard this, but might have been someone on staff, but talked about if you have a friend or family member that does not have a relationship with Christ, and it's as though they're standing in the middle of the road and a Mack truck is coming down the road. And once that Mack truck gets to them, like, there's no hope for them, right? And this analogy of how long do you try to gently relate to them to try to get them to move out of the way of the oncoming destruction? And at what point do you just have to say, you're about to get plowed over, so I just got to tell you exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
And the balance of relational evangelism and friendship evangelism and helping there to be relationship aspect of things. At what point do we share the gospel? Do we risk? This might be offensive because Jesus said the gospel is offensive.
Yeah.
But I think the key in that, and this goes back to the full swing of coming alongside of people, meeting people where they're at. We are never called by Christ to be the offense, right? And so I think the danger is when the believer becomes the offense. When we, because of our attitude or because of our personality or because of our standard of holiness, when we become the offense to the unbeliever and not the gospel, we're in error. The message of the gospel, the standard of God, if God is the offending party, so be it, right? We can't control that.
Yeah.
But I think there's a danger right now because a lot of times it's the Christian that is the offense, not the message, but the Christian. And that shouldn't be the case.
That shouldn't be the case.
Yeah.
And the hard thing with that analogy of the Mack truck, it's like, like if your daughter is standing on the road and a Mack truck is coming, chances are you're going to run and take her out of the way.
Correct.
But we cannot do that for people that are going to hell.
Correct. But but the analogy more consistently would be, I can't get to my daughter, and I can either yell or I can be like, hey, Ella, it'd be great if you'd listen to Daddy right now because I'm going to tell you something. Eventually, I got to get to the point of saying, like, there's a truck coming. Like, I got to tell them, right?
Coming. Yeah.
And so I think there's a balance,
there's
right?
a balance.
So the last question, and you cannot pick the DR. Okay. And it's in the message. It says you can't pick the DR.
Oh, they're specific
to
me.
It says it.
How did they know that it was?
I'm going to read this. It says, if you were a country.
If I was a country.
What country would you be and why? Also, Eric can't pick the DR for this question.
So if I was not a person but a country.
If you're a country, what country would you be?
Oh, I would be Israel.
Really?
Yeah, it's the Lord's nation.
Wow.
Yeah.
Still, Lord's nation still.
I would be.
So still, Lord's nation still.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
They're the Lord's people. Where they're currently, I mean, I'm not getting into that. I'll let you get into that if you want. That's another question for the podcast.
I would like you to get into that.
Nah, man, that's
You don't
gonna
wanna
be
get
another
into
hour.
that? I have time for another question,
Yeah.
so maybe I'll ask for clarity on that.
Yeah, what's the clarity you want?
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. So Israel. Okay.
Israel.
It's a very spiritual answer. That's good.
That's
That's good.
I mean,
Didn't I get? I think I got made fun of.
that's
by
not spiritual. I mean,
by a
it's,
couple people.
okay,
of
what do you
that's
want me
the-
to say?
that's the
America?
No.
You want me to say USA?
First of all, don't get so upset.
All right, I want to be
there's
USA. Put me there.
listen,
The
there's
land of the free. I
there's-
pledge allegiance
there-
to the flag to which I stand.
Wow. Listen,
that's all I know.
Who hurt you? Who hurt you? That you're you're like, it's okay. You're amongst friends here.
I mean,
You're
I
amongst friends here.
I thought it was a good answer.
That is a
Israel.
great answer.
Yeah.
It's a
Who do
perfect
you want to be?
answer.
And you're probably gonna say Italy.
Italy, Italia.
Yeah.
Listen, I already told you there's two types of people in the world: those that are Italian, those that want to be. And so, listen, Italy. What is there not to like about Italy?
I have never met one individual
Because I'm
besides you that would say, "I wish I was Italian." I have never met one individual that has said, "Man, I wish I was Italian."
So, do you like pizza?
Yeah.
Okay. Who doesn't like pizza?
Okay. Who doesn't like taco?
So everybody
So
likes
now I
it.
wanna
Well,
be
there's a lot of people who
Mexican?
don't like tacos.
What?
Yeah, I know there's people who don't like tacos.
Yeah, I know there's people that don't like pizza.
Have you ever met someone?
Yeah.
Who?
Vegans.
No,
People that are not healthy.
nope. People who are vegan can eat pizza.
I'm sure. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, but
you're making my point.
a
Okay, so this
gluten.
is
gluten.
this is
People
a-
that deal with gluten.
they have gluten-free pizza.
Yeah, but it doesn't taste the same.
gluten-free.
So they stay away from
It's
it.
gluten-free.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm assuming I can't pick
Yeah,
America
do you know of
because
anybody
I'm
who
American.
doesn't like taco?
Yes.
Do you know of anybody that doesn't like McDonald's?
Yes,
You do.
I do.
Who?
My daughter, she doesn't like McDonald's.
It's
Ella.
because she's Italian.
All I'm saying
No,
is
she's
it-
half Italian.
Why do you get so upset about this
No,
question? You're
she-
like really fired.
I'm not.
You're more fired up about this question, I think, than any question
Kind
I've
of
asked before.
You're right.
Wow. So you really do wish you were Italian. It's all
I
coming
do
out
not
now.
wish I was Italian.
It was quite. The buttons were pushed on that.
No, I told
one.
you I would like to be from Israel.
I didn't come up with the question,
Yeah,
but
but
that's
I
great.
came up with the answer.
Yeah, you said it was a very spiritual answer. Israel. It was very
Israel,
good.
yeah. Don't
Very
be jealous.
It was a very pastoral
don't be,
answer.
Don't be jealous because
Not-
you know,
I'm not. I wasn't.
at the
gonna
end
pick
of the day, I'll be standing. If I,
what does that mean? At the end of the day, we're standing. I don't know what that means.
Book of Revelation.
Okay. Well, very good. Well,
Yeah.
listen, I didn't know you were going to be so upset over that. But so be it. We'll
I'm
just
not
have to
offended.
have.
Listen, Bruce, this
I-
is this is like the typical technique of like someone who tries to win an argument. It's like,
What?
hey, I'm gonna make you feel
I
like
didn't
you're
know we were
mad or
argu-
offended.
I didn't know we were arguing.
Argument.
I'm just
Not
gonna.
arguing.
I will
argument.
use more kid gloves next session.
What
I
is it?
will. I will. I will be.
I
more,
want you to come wearing your Italian paraphernalia.
I
What
will
do you
be.
call that?
I will be more sensitive next time when asking questions. If you're
and I'll make sure to say I want to be American.
I didn't say you had to. This has been good. These are good. These are good questions.
These are great questions.
Good discussions.
This person needs to submit more
People
questions.
need to understand something that you and I we love each other.
We do love each
We're
other.
brothers in the. We don't genuinely fight, and so
No,
people.
no.
I think sometimes people can watch the podcast and be like, "Man, these guys really get on shit." We don't. We
Yeah.
purposely try to push each other's
Yeah.
buttons sometimes.
But we do appreciate each
But
other.
yes, we do. And so
Sometimes.
there's never. We'll be back next week.
We'll be back with a smile.
We'll be back with a
and
smile.
you know, handshakes. We
I'm
should come over
hoping
with a
next week
handshake.
you will bring a little bit more energy, though, if I'm honest, because you
Really?
seem a little tired today. So I'm hoping next week there's a little bit more.
Just tell me
Just a
that I
little
want to
bit-
be Italian. And
There's a
I'll get
little bit
excited.
more energy and get you fired up.
Start the podcast by telling me that I want to be Italian,
Yes.
and then I'll
Yes.
get going.
And just before we go, I do want to acknowledge new watch band. It looks really nice.
Wow.
It is a nice watch band. It's new.
Who put
Is
you
it
into
new?
This? Who put you into this?
No one. Is it new? It is new.
Yeah.
It's very nice.
Thank you.
So Aaron Judge, 61 home runs.
61 home runs.
Just a shout out to the
Did you
Yankees.
see that the guy who didn't catch it?
I
Man,
did.
That's
I'd
depressing.
be extremely disappointed.
He could have made some crazy money.
I'd be extremely.
But not
Would
to-
Jenny be upset if that was you? If you dropped that ball?
Oh, I've been sleeping on the couch for the next week. Especially if she found out how much I could have gone for that ball.
Shoshana would tell me, "Honey, good effort. I'm glad you tried."
Shoshana would have said, honey, it's okay. I'm
Oh,
sure you're going to get another opportunity.
Yes.
You're the best husband ever.
Yes. Yes.
I'm so glad that I'm married to an Italian.
Indeed. Indeed. This is true. Well, at the end of our session here, we like to always ask a question.
Yes.
I'm not sure how profitable this session is going to be for people, but what's the question that we
will
typically
be. It
ask?
will be.
We typically
We talk
ask,
about
Eric.
cursing.
We did.
We would like to know, what is your life beyond the pew?
Yeah, what is your life beyond the pew? We hope it's honoring to the Lord.
Yeah,
We hope you will come back next week. We will have another guest with us next week.
maybe 2.
So we want to
Maybe
make sure
3.
the people want to tune in because
Yeah.
all around the world,
All around the world.
Alaska, Hawaii, they want to tune in because
Yeah.
we'll have a couple guests next week.
Yeah.
We'll see you next week.
Don't forget to share, subscribe.
Yep.
And to like.
Yep. And Eric will know the number next week.
Not too soon.
Maybe.
37.
Okay.
37. Maybe I'll
We'll
know
see it.
3 more numbers.
Sounds good.
3 through 0, and then I'll figure 2 more.
Sounds good.
Okay.
We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.